the pursuit for quality or of quality is not for vanity. My journey, fortunately, have taken me to, this realization and this perspective that it is very rarely about myself or the business, but why we are doing this, we are doing it as a whole to be a more equitable sort of society. Sometimes you have to suck it up and make that difficult choice to give up your own balance, or you want to ask your team to give up their balance.
Hello everyone, welcome to Upfront with Front and Off Center. My name is Ian T. This is a podcast where we speak with guests about creative practices and how they get things done. In this first season, we speak with entrepreneurs in Singapore and learn a bit more about their work. Today's guest is Nor Aslam Bin Yusoff, the founder of The Community. The Community is a coffee bar and roastery with 3 locations in Singapore. Aslam also initiated the Coffee Roaster Forum, which is a platform for the exchange of knowledge among coffee professionals. I wanted to invite Aslam on the show as a long-time fan of The Community.
Thank you.
It was my introduction to the world of specialty coffee, and it's been wonderful to witness the business growing, from your first space in Far East Shopping Centre.
Far East Plaza.
Far East Plaza, oops, sorry.
No
Far
worries.
East Plaza. I hope our conversation would shed some light into the intricacies of specialty coffee and also what it takes to run a food and beverage business in Singapore. So to start things off, Aslam, how would you describe your creative practice?
Well, I think a lot of people would not associate coffee and everyday beverage almost commoditized. Well, it is a commodity, but with something that's creative. But if history has shown over the years, coffee and the industry, we have evolved from the product itself to how, at least from us in this part of the value chain, how we have portrayed, how we've communicated, and how we have executed this product. So I think that coffee is incredibly multifaceted, from business to agriculture, science, and then obviously business. It's very interesting to see how everyone has their take and perspective on coffee. Personally, for me, I have always been interested in communication with people as well. And because coffee is, again, incredibly diverse from its demographic to the people who actually produce these coffees, it challenges me from time to time, about communicating, being effective in my communication, and not just verbally, but also from a graphic point of view, and even from these small soft skill touches that we apply in our everyday work. Yeah.
Maybe to get our audiences more familiarized themselves with where you're coming from. Could you speak a little bit about your education, whether it's in school or elsewhere, that kind of planted the seeds?
Well, I pretty much, in secondary school at least, I was from a literature background. So I enjoy reading, I enjoy writing. And it kind of didn't really transpire into a tertiary education where I was left with, or really had to make a decision what I want to do in life. And I think, a little bit of digression, but I think it's so difficult as a 17-year-old to make a decision about what you want to do for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So I took a step into engineering, which is, I guess, also, if you think about it, it's creative. It forces you to think about solutions, so on and so forth, right? But coffee has always been something that I chanced upon. And I was really sort of enamored by how the everyday interaction with people who you would never think you'd meet. And that kind of really sparked my journey in coffee. And all those years ago, almost coming to 2 decades, so embarrassed to tell, almost 2 decades ago, the scene is so different from what it is right now. But I think that, what I really enjoy about coffee is that it never ends. You're learning to also, use a very tired word, your craft, mastery of your craft. You can actually never ever be a master of it, right? So that's something that has been really pushing me every single day to kind of like continue. Yeah.
You had your start working at different cafes in Singapore, and you opened your first venture called VXX Cooperative in 2016.
Yeah, that's right.
What motivated this move, going from working for somebody else to like starting your own business?
I was really, honestly, knew that I wanted to have my own place, have my own business, maybe about a year into coffee. And back then, I was just waiting to go into NS, but I had already spent a year working in coffee. And I thought that this is something that I could do for the rest of my life. And when I was in this place called Oriole Coffee, so we were given an opportunity to kind of like rebrand ourselves. And that kind of like allowed us to really meet people from all over the world who were really, I would say my idols, I guess you would say, that they were really good at what they do. And when we were given that opportunity to kind of like work with them, it really opened my eyes into what else coffee could be and its far reaches. So VXX Cooperative was kind of like I would say, I envisioned it to be a hub where we would be able to work with, any intersecting industries and provide I would say, support or assist in businesses who share the same drive, same dream as us. So we wanted to be able to, have like a designer or a photographer or, a marketing person within the cooperative who will be able to help other intersecting industries. So that was the big dream. It was a big dream. And I'm a bit of I have a bit of a Scandi fetish. So I was very, again, enamored by what people in Scandinavia were doing back then. And this was, again, 2014, 2015. So before we actually started this VXX journey, we went to, the different Scandinavian cities to kind of like have a feel of what's the hype about. And that really, I guess, played a very big role in shaping, I believe, my coffee and entrepreneurial journey for the time to come.
What were the learnings you took from this venture that you applied into when you started the community?
I think, coffee or rather business is an entirely different subject from coffee. People of, from my industry, we tend to think that just because we've worked 5 years, 8 years, that we're ready to run a business. When in actual fact, running an actual business or driving a business is so separate. It requires an entirely different skill set. And I think, to be honest, my partner and I back then, we were really good at what we did, but we had no clue about business, the nitty-gritty details of a lot of things. And I think one of the biggest lesson that I kind of like took away was how to actually propel a business forward. And it required a lot of different moving parts where we had to have people in different positions or roles and responsibilities that would play their part to each value add to the business. So for me, it was important that I stepped out of, my position or my mindset as just a coffee professional to think, okay, how do I push the business forward? So that was, the biggest lesson. And after all these years, the lesson hasn't stopped. I'm still in the middle of the lesson. So yeah, that's been really difficult.
In terms of the kinds of vision that you have for the community, besides it being, as the name suggests, like a space where people could gather, almost recalling, the early origins of the salon and stuff like that, right? In terms of the product offerings, how did you approach it?
I think in our earlier years, it was a very interesting challenge, because some of you might know Far East Plaza back in the day. It was a super hip mall, right? We had a lot of very creative of fashion, places like Ambush, like Left Foot or whatsoever. So when we first came across this spot at Far East Plaza, it was a little bit, is this going to work?
Yeah.
Is this going to work? And surrounded by a lot of popular and I would say even generational local fare, it was a very unique challenge to position ourselves and try to capture the crowd there. And I think for us, it was always necessary to keep reminding ourselves why we're here, why we're doing what we're doing, instead of trying to sort of like go with the flow and continually pivot into what we might think would work for the business, which at the end of the day, as the name suggests, we wanted to build a community of coffee drinkers, coffee lovers, coffee professionals, and hopefully grow that community. Yeah. So I think at the end of the day, our product is something that unique back then and still is, but we wanted to make sure that we did not change the integrity of the product, which was coffees that were or are representative of the origin, of the unique variety and the processing methods. Yeah, so that was important.
And for that, could you maybe also talk a little bit in terms about how, in the introduction, I mentioned that you have a roastery now, but before that, how did you get things done?
When we first started community, we were pretty sure that we wanted to serve coffees in our way. And before we actually started a roastery, we approached a couple of friends who already owned roasteries back then to possibly roast coffees in the style that we wanted. And I think this was kind of like a spark or kickstarted a lot of things where, I had a certain idea how I wanted the coffees to taste like, or the style of coffees that we wanted to serve. And this also, working with them, required them to think out of the box, be creative in the way they approach how they had to roast these coffees. So for example, espresso-based coffees or flat whites, cappuccinos, they tend to be, you need to roast them a little darker so that, because otherwise espresso will be really sour. But we were very adamant that we did not want our coffees to be, to have any hint of bitterness. So it was very different, the way we sort of positioned ourselves and what we required of our roasters. And after a while, I think that, when you realize that, actually we have the ability to have total and full control of our product and the way we want to display it, that was the journey. Then we just said, all right, let's just do it ourselves. Yeah.
So in a way, it was kind of like a logical next step.
Yeah.
To ensure the quality and the consistency that you're after.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a lot of trust work, right? Like even if you work with a wholesale roaster, you have to trust that they are doing their part. And then it goes down the value chain as well. You, as a roaster, you would also trust that the coffees that you purchased, were processed or were harvested in the way that would best showcase. So I think for us, we wanted that element where we would be able to experiment further. Yeah, I think in our industry, we use the word push the boundaries, which, okay, sure. But yeah, we really wanted to push the boundaries of what roasting differently could mean, and apply it in a setting where people could understand it. Yeah, and I think that location at Far East Plaza worked because, again, against the backdrop of local, fairs, local places, our product stood out. The location, I guess the interior, the very bare, I would say utilitarian sort of like vibe also stood out. And yeah, it worked. It worked.
Yeah, I think for me, the first time I was there, I knew I was at the right spot because of the pink,
You did?
the pink,
The pink neon?
the pink sign. Yeah, so that was like, okay, I know I'm at the right
Yeah.
place.
It was never really kind of like our intention to utilize such a striking font or color, but I think along the over the years it kind of like stuck, and we just naturally drifted towards that sort of like aesthetic. So I guess it all worked out.
Yeah, maybe to also delve a little bit deeper into the ways that you communicate the coffee offerings that you have. You do have a pretty interesting way of describing.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, this again, I think the irony about coffee is that even as a commoditized product, it's so misunderstood, it's so complex, it's confusing, yet it's actually really easy. And for us, we wanted to, find the most effective way, if not the most, I would say, visually obvious way that people would be able to tell that coffees are actually, for diverse. And from the start, we've always wanted to showcase the diversity in coffee, not just in its taste, but also, how it could smell like, how it could feel like, so on and so forth. So I've always been, I guess, inspired by, I would say, like retail or fashion, and being able to visually capture the imagination of what guests, when they look at coffees and they realize that, hey, what's all this? I think from the start, that was always our intention. So we kind of like break down into 4 different categories. We have what we call our classic coffees. And usually these coffees are coffees these are your everyday coffees, right? And they are produced in a way that's been sort of like handed down by generations. Yet at the core of it, classic coffees from different origins will taste different. So we wanted to take a different approach where we weren't really describing the customer's experience or the potential experience, but instead how these coffees were produced from a producer perspective. So we have classic, we have modern, we have experimental, as the name suggests, and then we have our kind of like highest tiered coffee, which we call the Pinnacle series. So, and I think that everyone who drinks coffee or are curious about it, they will have their own journey. And we want them to be aware at which point of their journey they're at. And, it's fine if you come in and you immediately want to start with the Pinnacle. That's great, that's great, right? But sometimes people are not ready for it. I think it's a lot like maybe for fashion, where not everyone understands why, besides the brand, but why certain things cost more, why certain things are more accessible, and coffee is like that.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I think that very much reflected my kind of early experiences with specialty coffee, where there are lots of instances where it kind of defies your expectations.
It defies.
It can taste like a tea sometimes. Some things don't even taste like coffee.
Yeah.
And I thought that the 4 kind of frameworks or the 4 categories that you you have tried to communicate this was really very effective, because you're not stuck on where the beans are from or how it's treated, which don't make sense to someone who's new to it.
Yeah. We use a lot of words, we use a lot of, technical terms that are entirely foreign, to the everyday consumer who maybe they just want a quiet space to sit down and really enjoy a flat white. But I think we would be doing a disservice, not just to ourselves, but also, again, to the producers of these coffees, if we did not sort of pay a small tribute, right? That these coffees were, in fact, from here, and these other people that produced it. And I think people or consumers tend to appreciate it a little bit more when they understand that a lot of work has gone into it, no matter how much they enjoy this particular product. So that was something that we were very keen on. Yeah.
Could you share maybe one really encouraging moment that you had as you on this journey of growing and sustaining the community?
I have to say that currently at my stage in my life, this is my dream. I'm living my dream. I've been living my dream for the last 8 years, and for me it's about helping. I don't like to use the word help. Sometimes it feels a bit like self-serving, but it's about paving the way for the next generation. We have a lot of young or even people who are of the same age that finally sort of understand the intricacies of the industry. And for me, being able to play a small part in paving a way for them, professionally or even personally, into better versions of themselves, I think for me that has always been my biggest satisfaction in running a business. But of course, a business, you've got to be viable.
Yes.
You've got to be financially viable, financially sustainable, and as a business, you should not lose focus on that.
What would you say is perhaps the biggest challenge that you're facing now, or the biggest challenge you have overcome so far in terms of the business side of things?
It's always about, I believe, getting the right group of people or individuals who share that same zest to be excellent at what they do. And I think that coffee on the surface, as an industry, there's a form or some sense of glamorization about the industry, where we have, these days, content creators, influencers that, they each play a vital role, I'm pretty sure, in the industry. But the hard work, remains. There's a lot of hard work to be done in coffee and from the hospitality point of view. And not everyone is cut out to be, I would say, the next content creator or influencer. A lot of us, we really enjoy the coffees that we are brewing, but being able to convince or communicate it in a manner that an everyday consumer would understand and appreciate, I think that's been very difficult. Finding the right people who share that same zest. And of course, hospitality is not necessarily the, I would say, hottest, job in the market, right? And it means a lot of sacrifice from that particular individual to want to be able to do this and achieve something out of it. So yeah, finding the right people. I've been incredibly lucky to work with so many, I would say, driven individuals, really talented people who have already, kind of like also made their mark in the industry. So there's a light at the end of the tunnel. It's just a very long tunnel right now. Yeah.
Maybe could you share a little bit in terms of this number of your team, how the size of your team and the number of people you work with on a daily operational
basis.
kind of basis?
Yeah. It's a small team. So what a lot of people might know is that we have 3 small shops, plus a roastery. But we also have 2 more shops that are inside offices that are employees only. So those are also, part of our ecosystem, which we also believe is important for the business. It's not exactly glamorous, but you're actually really serving coffees to people who really need it, right, for their daily driver. So we have 5 shops, including a web shop and a roastery. But we have an incredibly lean team. So including myself, we have like about, maybe 7 full-timers and a small team of part-timers as well. So I think what we do differently and what I've always sort of wanted to do differently was to be able to offer my teammates what we call like secondary roles. So you're not just a coffee professional, but you have, for example, a secondary role where it's a role where about something that you are particularly interested or passionate in. So for example, graphic design. So we have baristas who are really good at graphic design as well, and so they help with the whole thing, right? The design every single month. We will taste coffees at the end of every month to kind of come up with the colors, come out with the tone and the shade of the colors for the following month's coffees. And then we have photographers who are really passionate about photography. And so for us, being able to kind of like offer a slightly different role to just being operational and just being a barista, I believe has kind of like kept people invested as well in their time with us. So it's a small team, and everybody doubles up doing things that they are passionate about. So hopefully that kind of like helps out.
You talked about the challenge of finding people and securing that team. In terms of hiring new members and onboarding them, what does like training look like for like a part-timer? Because it's not just about like cleaning and preparing. You need to be able to serve,
of course,
meet the customers and also execute on whatever coffee that you are.
So I do believe we run things a little bit differently. So anyone new who comes through our doors, they actually immediately learn how to start making coffee, and I think it's silly if you work in a coffee company but you don't know how to make coffee. So that's like the first thing that they do. So I believe we have quite a rigorous training module that sort of part-timers have certain benchmarks or proficiencies that they need to hit within the first week or the first month. And they actually are not encouraged to be the front-facing service or hospitality in our coffee bars. So they usually tend to be more focused on making coffee. Because for me, if you mess up an espresso shot, that's maybe 50 cents or 70 cents. But if you mess up an interaction, through no fault of your own or whatever, but that's compounding. You might never see this customer again, you might never see this guest again. So for us, our more senior team members are the ones who are always at the front, saying hi to our guests. But of course, we make sure that everybody plays their part in hospitality. But usually, the first part-timer, the first thing that part-timers do is they will learn how to make a coffee. And we give them like a week to get used to the, entire workflow. And some people just have a natural gift for it. Some people need a little bit more time, but that's the beauty of it. That's the challenge, right? If everybody was really good at it, then we probably wouldn't need so many people.
What makes you say yes to like a new project or like a collaboration?
for the longest time, I think that we have this, and when I say we as industry and even a demographic of the consumer base, is that smaller is better. Micro, people have this sort of false assurance that the quality is always looked after when you are small, and I think there's truth in that. But for coffee to truly have an, I would say, a deeper impact, a deeper reach, we need to grow. And I say grow, I don't say expand, right? Because growth is natural. Expand, I guess, is a reaction to energy, right? But yeah, we want to grow to a point where we are able to make a positive impact. So growth is important. And for us, I think my partners and I, we're very realistic about our position, our capabilities as a brand and as a business. It's important to kind of like understand whether we are able to have, again, the right number of people before we take on a project. That's number one. If it's a collaborative project, which we have undertaken quite a bit, it's about seeing whether there is a suitable brand alignment and business alignment with the potential collaborator. So we've been pretty lucky to have worked with some really, really good brands, but sometimes the business aspect doesn't work out, and you have to know when to just call it a day. Yeah. So one of more of our recent projects is actually in Odeon Towers. We are in a shared space with Emirates, and that's a global brand. That's huge, right? And this is their Asia office or whatever. So, we were very honored that they invited us to be part of their space. And we would think that being in City Hall, in Odeon Towers, right opposite Raffles Hotel, besides Bras Basah, it would be like, oh, super bustling. But it's further from the truth, right? So sometimes it's also, you think that there are some really good collaborations, but sometimes it doesn't pan out that way. And that is the time where you really turn on your business hat and think about, okay, what else do we have to do, right? Without straying too far away from our core values or core products, and try to navigate our way around this. I think, brand alignment is super important. And of course, it has to be, again, financially sustainable or viable for us to take up that partnerships usually.
Yeah. In addition to the beans that you roast in-house, you also have, like, from time to time, like, products from other brands. So, I mean, the one that really comes to mind is like Fosa chocolate, which is something I always remember because I have a friend who's a big fan. And one of the few places where she could consistently get the chocolate is from the community. So she'd be like, okay, I'm going to get my coffee and then I'm going to get like the chocolate at the same time. Could you maybe share the story behind that?
Yeah, again, we always wanted to work with very similar, like-minded businesses, and Fosa is obviously one of them, and we have seen how they've also sort of like evolved and grown their business. And we have, I think maybe we started using Fosa in, I think, 2020 or 2021. And it was just a natural sort of like progression to merge, I would say, two of the most, I guess, popular products in the world to do this collaboration. And it was a special one for us because we were able to procure a coffee from a small producer in Ethiopia, where usually Ethiopian coffees are, a big lot that's being kind of like supplied by hundreds of farmers. So to have like one a lot of coffee that came from a single guy from his farm in his backyard, that was quite special to us. So we wanted to do something special with that, and I approached Jay of Fosa to do a collaboration because, again, it's two of the most popular things in the world, coffee and chocolate. Yeah. And I think for us, it was also very interesting to see how people perceive chocolates, because everybody thinks of chocolate, maybe, sweeter, but the chocolates that we've been using and the ones that we've used in our hot chocolates or the mochas have always tend to be a little bit more, I would say, fruit forward in terms of its taste, very different, not as sweet. So I think that being able to kind of like be on that parallel line was something we really enjoyed doing. Yeah.
Looking ahead, is there something that you wish to achieve personally or through the community?
I want more off days. I mean, personally, it's always a sort of I would say goal of mine to push it to the 10-year mark. So I've got 2 more years, right? And I think that I would really like to see, as a whole, the local coffee industry to do better. And I think, so we've been doing this, for like, maybe, I think the earliest kind of like specialty or even, cafe, maybe 2010, 2009. So that's like 16 years. So it's interesting to see the evolution of the spaces. I would like to see, personally for me, where we are able to help or be part of more of these new spaces that share the same sentiments about what coffee can be and what a retail experience can be. I think personally for me, like I said, I've mentioned this is my dream. I'm living it. So we'll see how long that dream lasts. But also it's about, making things happen for my team members and making sure that they also achieve what they want to achieve. And I think that for me is something that has been pushing me every single day, because a lot of people come into the industry and they're not sure where it might lead. But I always tell them, if you work in a coffee bar, you meet hundreds of people every single day, and every single person is a new opportunity for you to make a connection, make a relationship that you never know what doors it might open for you. Yeah, so to try and kind of like pass that along and to make sure that they, at the end of their day with us, they get to achieve what they want to.
What is one assumption about running a F&B business that you hope to address?
This is a very difficult question because there are a lot of assumptions. I think that the quality of manpower has always been something that I would say has stopped a lot of people from actually pursuing a career in hospitality or coffee. And the people that I've met and have been blessed to meet and work with, they are honestly one of the most smartest people that I've met, and not just from an academic background, but also the agility of their sort of perspectives, being able to navigate through multiple situations. I think the people who are in coffee so far, especially in the last, I would say 5 years, we have a lot of young graduates who, I guess, not really keen on a corporate job. So there are a lot of really smart people in coffee. And we need to, as an industry, we need to embrace that. And we need to embrace that and portray ourselves in a manner that the general consumer base will understand that and appreciate what we do a little bit better. Yeah, so I think, that's kind of like an assumption that F&B or hospitality is low skilled, but it's a lot of different skills.
Yeah.
It's a lot of different skills. Yeah. And you know, if history, you know, has shown or whatever it is, sometimes, you know, the people who actually do really well in hospitality may not necessarily come from a good academic background, but they can be incredibly, you know, empathetic. They can be witty, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
They bring a lot other kind of qualities to the table.
Yes. Yeah. And coffee, I think, is, again, you know, such a interesting subject that we even have to date, right? Scientists who have dedicated time outside of their own professional scope of work to write books about coffee, the physics of coffee, water chemistry. And it just goes to show that there's a lot more that we can go, a lot further that we can go, a lot more that we can do to kind of like slowly increase the appreciation and acknowledgement of this product.
I think something that perhaps has become more commonplace, especially since COVID, I would say, is really like people doing like hand pours at home and, you know, buying beans from whether it's local roasteries or getting subscriptions from elsewhere and then brewing it themselves. I'm wondering, what do you feel about this trend, and where do you think the community is able to, you know, offer in terms of people who perhaps just are interested in buying beans home and doing it themselves?
Do you brew your own coffee at home?
I don't. So I spend my money at your place.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, either way, it helps us. I mean, yeah, COVID has helped a lot. To be honest, we actually, I think right in the middle of COVID, we were doing a lot more kind of like bottled beverages, right? But I think since COVID, the appreciation and the take-up of home brewing has, I think, exponentially increased. I think it's good on a lot of fronts. What I think for us as a business, we are able to, you know, grow a market where it's invisible. It doesn't have to be physical, but it's huge, right? So this is another part of the business where we need to strategize how we are going to make the customer experience, the digital customer experience, as seamless, as efficient as possible, and as, you know, aesthetically pleasing. So we've started to see a lot of that, right? And for us, I think it's great because people tend to, you know, they buy our coffees and then they were like, oh, I'm never able to, you know, brew as well as you. So there's a certain, I guess, appreciation, lowest hanging fruit, the appreciation for what we do, because they understand that it's not difficult.
Yeah, they have the same materials.
They have the same
materials.
The outcome,
there's still a difference.
Yeah. So a couple of years back, we actually switched out one of our commercial grinders to actually just the home grinder across all our coffee bars. Something that is, you know, relatively affordable. So the sort of, again, impetus behind that was to show our guests that actually you can make really good coffee at home with this small grinder, right? All you need is, you need to start with good coffee, and you know, you don't need to blow thousands of dollars on gear, right? Which can be obviously inhibitive for a lot of people. So for us, and we also see a shift, or rather not shift, but a concentrated effort by a lot of, I would say, coffee product manufacturers, that they realize that the pie is growing of people who brew coffee at home, and a lot of products are being developed to kind of like satiate that market. I think what I hope happens is that two things. Yeah, people continue to appreciate that, oh, it's actually not easy to make really good coffee. But it also, I guess, makes people understand that coffee is super diverse, and there are businesses that will be able to sort of like supply or provide them with whatever style of coffee that they prefer. Yeah. Having coffees from overseas is always great, because us as a roaster, right, we're able to compare ourselves with, what are the best people in the world doing. So that's always a good thing for the local industry as well. Yeah.
And talking about home brewing, what does work-life balance look like for you?
I mean, you're assuming I have work-life balance. It's a very bold assumption. No, so funny story. My family right now, they're in Bali. So we spent since the start of December, we've been in Bali, and I had to come back for like a week to work. So and in this time, in the last week where I've been alone at home, I've been at work. Even like, just having dinner at work. So it's work-life balance is incredibly important. I every year strive to swing that balance a little bit more. But sometimes you have to suck it up and make that difficult choice, the decision to whether you would want to give up your own balance, or you want to ask your team to give up their balance. I think the ideal goal is to, yes, achieve a business where everybody has enough time to rest, because it is emotionally draining. It is physically, mentally draining, and people need time for that. So holidays are great, travel is great. So hoping to travel a little bit more. But work-life balance is a myth. As a creative, right? Because when you are just also not working, you're all taking in, your sights, your sounds. So for me, it's super difficult to turn that off. To turn that off. But I'm hoping to do better. Hoping to do better for that. Yeah.
What core values have kept you grounded, whether it's in business or in this creative practice?
I think that the most important thing that I continually strive to remind myself is that the pursuit for quality or of quality is not for vanity, right? We don't do some things because we want people to say we're good. It's not for vanity. It's an expensive commitment, and with it is a responsibility to enrich the lives of people who have contributed to that benefit. So my journey, fortunately, have taken me to this realization and this perspective that it is very rarely about myself or the business, but why we're doing this. We are doing it for, as a whole, to be a more equitable sort of society. And this is a realization, or this is a, I guess, perspective that not everybody will have. But as business owners, as leaders, we have the platform to say and enact such things. So for me, we indulge in quality. We indulge in the top 5% of the coffees that are produced in the world. But a lot of that, we have to sort of remind ourselves that there's a lot more to be done. So people on the less fortunate scale, I guess, they would also be able to reap these benefits, these rewards.
Yeah.
It's not. I think that, I might be wrong, but coffee is one of those industries where the pursuit of quality, it actually, when you indulge or when you pursue quality, it actually helps someone down the value chain. So buying better coffee, drinking nicer coffee, more expensive coffees, most of the time, you're helping someone. You're part of the decision, part of the buying process where a family or someone actually really benefits from it. Someone who is, maybe less fortunate than you. Yeah.
So it's with the understanding that you are also part of a larger chain and making sure that
Exactly.
the value goes back
The value
to the
should
people
go back.
who have
The value
contributed
should go back. Exactly.
towards your success or towards the cup of coffee you're enjoying.
Yeah. And that perspective is obviously, not easily shared or not easily communicated over a counter, over a transaction. So we as an industry must be creative in how we find opportunities to, I guess, subliminally or even, outwardly display this message. Yeah.
We always end the episodes with 2 rapid fire questions.
Okay, let's
so
do it.
The first one is, could you tell us about something you've read, watched, listened to, or seen recently that nourished you?
I've been in a little bit of a rut these days, but I always enjoy pranks. And there's this real prank, I'm not sure if you guys know, but there's this power lifter who always disguised as a cleaner, and he goes around to gyms, right? Anatoly, right? And he pretends to, be a cleaner, and he surprises those, muscle men with the weight that he carries. And I think that is always refreshing because at the core of it is about not judging, a book by its cover. So I like to take that kind of lighthearted approach to a lot of things. From coffee interactions to just, the kind of coffees that we serve. So yeah, that's always, I spend too much time being serious. So looking at this, lighthearted things, helps me a little bit.
And finally, in a word, what does creativity mean to you?
Creativity to me is about perspective. Yeah. You can basically, fall into a common perspective or make a conscious effort to look at things differently. And I believe that the wider your perspective is, the better person you can become. You make better decisions. You just become a better person.
That's a great note to end on. Thank you, Aslam.
Thank you so much, Ian. We appreciate it.